Welcome everyone to our recorded ANCSA at 50 conversation. We've got 3 community facilitators here who are all part of making this program possible. So the forum started hosting community conversations in January of 2022. And this was following the 50th anniversary of the Alaska Native Settlement Claims Act. The forum hosted a series of conversations that were aimed at exploring our relationship to one another and the policy. These local and statewide conversations were grounded not in academic or professional expertise, but in lived experiences. The forum's ANCSA at 50 conversation series was a time for our community to come together and gather, share stories, and imagine the possibilities the next 50 years hold. And so I'm going to pass the rest off to our community facilitators here who are going to talk about their experience hosting these conversations and what they're taking away.
Thank you, Taylor. So I'm going to open it up to Crystal and Brianna first. What were the questions or curiosities you had when you started hosting these Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act at 50 community conversations?
Gosh, knowing that this was such a polarizing topic, I was really curious about some of the landmines that we would step on. But that actually quickly subsided because I was really interested. I was interested in hearing from different perspectives, voices, the sentiment around ANCSA. And this was just the right type of forum that gathered unique perspectives and essentially in a place that, I wouldn't normally or organically actually have these discussions. So it was really, one thing led to another, very adding more curiosities throughout the entire experience. It was wonderful.
Yes, knowing that we were doing these conversations throughout different regions, I was just very curious to see what the different perspectives were. And then just the different groups that we have spoken with too. I was really nervous, really nervous how some conversations were going to, the outcomes of the conversations, but they were so wonderful. They were so engaging. And just there was always just that more. We want more. We want to have more conversations, and it felt so good that it was so engaging. There's this need and want to have further conversations about this, and then also just seeing had the opportunity to do a youth conversation, and just seeing what we didn't know, and then that interest of what else can we learn, and just dropping those little seeds, and just then seeing it spread throughout the community. It's just been so beautiful.
I think before each conversation, I was really nervous who was waiting in the waiting room. I'm like, who's on? Who's going to join? But I think it really highlighted that saying, like, whoever was meant to be there was there. Each of the conversations, it seemed very diverse and balanced, at the same time, to really bring forth a lot of different perspectives. So I think my biggest curiosity was how that was all going to play out. And to see it work so well was a pleasant surprise.
So Bree and Casey, what stood out to you most about this experience?
The level of engagement and the amount of aha moments that we saw during the conversation, it was really awesome. There were so many questions, so many experiences, so many relationships that were built. It just felt so powerful and so fulfilling.
I reflected a lot on how identity is developed in different levels of connectedness, and kind of this thing as Alaska Native people that we all experience, right? Like, did you grow up in your tribal community? Do you speak your language? Do you have a Native name? Are you a member of a tribe? And then are you a shareholder, right? There's all these different questions we all get asked as Indigenous people in this state, and how that impacts us and our identity. I spent a lot of time thinking about, and it could be really emotional, just depending on how one answers those questions, and how they may feel disconnected from different parts, and the role ANCSA has had in that.
I think too, a lot of the things that I took away even from you, Casey, is a lot of that conversation about it. There was identity and reflecting on that. I actually had the joy of being able to do it in person here in Juneau, and one of my friends that attended, she calls herself an elder, and I don't know if she's quite there yet, but I'll let her have it. And so she feels like she has been so disconnected that she didn't feel like she could speak to these conversations, but there was so much value in the things that she brought and shared. And also checking in with her after one of the conversations we had, like she said that she had learned so much, and especially from the different types of sentiment that was in the room, on different sides, different ends of the spectrum when it comes to ANCSA, that it really made her think about it and continue to have these conversations with folks in her family.
All right. So I have a question. What new ideas did you hear?
I know one of the things that really touched my heart was seeing the older generations really care about the future generations. One of the gentlemen shared, that his generation was around when ANCSA passed, right? And so what they got out of it, being born at the time or before the passage. And so, what they got out of it. But then those of us who were born after, what do we get? What do our children, what do our grandchildren get from ANCSA? And how is that equitable? And so what he pointed out is being so focused on today that we forget about the future, and how that statement, how much it applies to different areas of the different work we do, whether it be sustainable fisheries, subsistence rights. There's just so much that we do need to take into consideration for the future.
I think I'd piggyback on that too, just a little. It's not really a new idea, but really illuminating that heavy anxiety and the concerns that our Alaska Native shareholders, descendants, and others carry with them as they look to the future, and what that means to have a voice in what is the future of Alaska, and between regional and village corporations and so much more. It really carried a huge impact in the weight of that, and it really made me nervous. It made me especially nervous.
I think same. So one of the moments in one of the conversations that we were in that really stood out to me was a gentleman just talking about how they don't feel like they're heard. Like, where do we go to speak about these things? How do we elevate these voices so these voices are heard to everyone, from everyone? It was just so powerful. And so again, maybe not new ideas, but things that need to happen, which leads me into my next question of what are some of the questions do we think our community needs to be asking?
one of the comments shared was needing more well-informed community members, especially those elected into office. And so I think about just how a lot of people do not know much about the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act or how it impacts them. And my mom works out of school, and she's worked there a long time, has seen year after year students come through, and there was a group of kids that had no idea what it was all about, right? And so just concern for how that will impact them and their identity too, like when they will learn about it, the impact that will have on them. So I think our community needs more conversations about this and more education and availability of that information, and making sure it has a place that people can access and learn.
Questions that are really floating to the top for me are really truly like, what about the next 50 years? What about the next generation? Because the way that corporations are designed, they're not always designed to last forever. And so what does that mean for our next generation, the future of our people here in Alaska? And I also consider too is who else does this impact, that between all of us here, those of us that are very familiar with ANCSA, as complicated and complex as that the entire thing is, but who else is impacted outside of that? And having more of these conversations and communicating about it, totally agree with that.
That was one of the main questions I was thinking too. Who else does this impact? But then also having the youth conversation, it's just been interesting to see, having a conversation in a classroom rather than having someone sit up and teach about what ANCSA is, and just seeing the different questions that came out of it, but also how powerful the silence was, because there was so much realization of what? Like, there's a secret that has been, in the world for so long, and how do we not know about it? And just so many questions. There just was not enough time for everyone to share how they were feeling and what they needed to learn and how they're going to move on. But there was also this super powerful moment of where one of the students was just, you could tell they were just getting super emotional. And I'm like, what's going on in there? And like, my sister fights for this. And there was like just this like respect and just this love that was pouring out, and just realizing, wow, my sister's been fighting for this. And it's just, everything was just so powerful.
Yeah. So we talked about a little bit about the curiosities that we had kind of going into this process and this project here, and the things that really stood out to us, the experiences, the questions that we were taking away, and we're talking about the future especially, and working with youth. That's so exciting. What else are we taking away, really taking away from this experience?
I have a lot of gratitude for the opportunity to work with both of you and learning from both of you. So just want to say thank you for that. It also made me think a lot about sovereignty and how that is defined. I think that's one of the terms that we could use, some more time talking about, and just how sovereignty is defined, how it's unique in Alaska, and how it's not from the land, but it's an inherent right from our tribal citizenship, and how tribal sovereignty has maybe been even more confused because of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. And so how we can remain strong in our foundation as sovereign people with the complexities that INCSA brings.
I think for me, it's love and community. Oftentimes, I feel like there's so many negative conversations about angst that makes me feel super drained, honestly, and almost hopeless that we're going to be able to move forward in a positive way. But these conversations have really just made me feel all of the love that so many people in Alaska and in the world have for our land and our way of life. Um, and then how many there was something that an elder said that when they came to the Fairbanks in-person meeting, um, and just the group that we were surrounded with, many of them have studied ANCSA, have taught ANCSA, and none of them really talked about their research or anything like that, but the personal connections, and that this was the first time that many of them have been together in so long that it kind of ignited their want and need to continue to communicate with another, to meet with one another, and share the knowledge that they have. It just it felt so good. And so I'm just taking away the love and community and all of the work that everyone in our communities is doing to move forward for the next 50 years in a positive way.
It just gives me chills. It warms me up. I love it. I think one of the themes too that I was really picking up between all the conversations, formally and informally, that I'd had is how do we implement educating this more so in schools and more for all the youth, not just Alaska Native, but for everybody that is here in Alaska, and taking such a complicated topic and breaking it down in a way where we can understand it a little bit better. And I take away that experience, especially from in any of the interactions that I have with youth today, especially in big brother, big sister, a little, that, makes me want to have these conversations sooner with him, but like try not to bombard him. But ultimately too, is just be curious. Just be curious. And it's okay if you don't know everything about such a complicated topic now, but it's okay to be curious and ask questions and be more involved in your learning journey, no matter where you are, and understanding such a thing like this. So I appreciate you both. This has been a wonderful journey.